Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Mind Movers Season 2. Today I am bringing my dad, Dr. Alex Eskander, which makes me so happy because he literally is my hero. And, Payman asked me, said, what's the angle? And I said, my dad is incredible because his story he always downplays it, like typically from someone that comes from the Middle East. But his story is incredible, how he came to the UK, how he created what he created, harnessed the right kind of values in me and my sister, who's ended up working really hard. And on top of that, he's one of the top gynecologists in the UK, which is true. And what's amazing is anytime I post him, a whole load of people on my Instagram go, he's my gynecologist, and they say always the most wonderful things about you. My father also is the person that told me to do egg freezing. I think way before it was topical, there was a lot of taboo, and he'd been talking about it long before people had started doing it. And I think it's a really great way for people who are listening to this podcast to really understand the implications for female health and why that's beneficial. So welcome, Daddy.
Hi, thank you. Welcome to you. Thank you for having me on your shows.
Amazing. Okay, Dad. So I want people to hear your story about how you came to the UK from Egypt.
Okay, so back in the 60s, when I went to medical school in 1963, I immediately knew after the third or fourth year that I wanted to be an obstetrician gynecologist. Actually, just the first moment I delivered a baby, I just felt joy and happiness, and I thought I did a great job. In fact, just the baby came out and I just held the baby, but it was just a great experience. And from then onwards, I just planned to be a gynecologist. And in the 60s, and still until today, being a member of the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists in the UK has always been a big name. To be a member of that college, very distinguished. So it's been my ambition and ambition of a lot of people in Egypt, and I'm sure around the world, and I'm sure until today. So it was more famous than the American board at that time. So I planned my journey that I'm going to leave at the end of my first year internship to go to UK to study for the membership and train, because again, the British training, English training at the time was one of the best, okay? So the last year of my internship, last year in university, an internship was not an easy year because during my working hours, I had to obtain the approval of my work, where I was working, the approval of the army to let me go because I was supposed to be going to the army for the regular
military service.
Military service, exactly.
Hold on, so that was normal in Egypt? I didn't even know that.
Until today.
Did you know that?
But only, yes.
Yeah.
So at 18, you're supposed to go to
So everyone does it?
Everyone does it. Even Dr. Gorgi did it.
Wow.
So you're only exempted if you're the only son. I was the only son, but it was still temporary because my mother could have had another boy, and therefore both of us have to go. But
so how old were you when you decided to move?
I was about 23 at that time. So when I was in that position. So when I said I wanted a final exemption from the military because I was the only son and my mother had a hysterectomy. Now, funny enough, I went to the army officer and I said, listen, but my mother had her womb out, so she's not going to have any more children, so you don't have to worry. He said, we've never had that heard of that before, doctor, so we still have to make it temporary. It was the most difficult period of my internship for 3 months trying to obtain a visa. We had exit visa at the time, so you have to have the government to sign to say you can go out of the country, which I hated, and it's no longer the case. However, anyway, I managed with difficulty, and I was...
How did you get your plane ticket to England?
Well, actually, my mother was very clever. So I was engaged to a girl whom she didn't like. Funny enough. But I liked her, and I said, it doesn't matter if you don't like her, I like her. So she knew the only way to get me out was a one-way ticket to pursue my dream in the UK. And who could refuse a ticket to the UK to study and to see the Beatles country, the hippies?
Had you never been before?
Never been.
And what were your initial reaction when you got the...
Excitement. I mean, I was only 22, 23 when she said.
And London in the 60s was the centre of the world, right?
No, I mean, not many people traveled like that nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, fantastic to travel. And I also had my best friend here already, so I'm going to join him as well. And I'm going to work in British hospitals. And the NHS was a great institution, really, to train. So everybody aspired to go and train obs and gynae in the UK. So here we are. I took the flight. I landed, stayed with my friend. And sooner or later, 2 to 3 months later, I took my first post in Lincoln.
Lincoln, can you deal? I know.
And I wanted to stay in London, really. London.
Did you cry?
No, I didn't. I was excited to see the countryside. Everybody talked about the countryside of England, but I was disappointed. Why? Why? Number one, I took a train, a very cold train from King's Cross to Newark, I remember. And when I arrived, number one, the train that I had actually was not luxurious as the train we had in Egypt.
That's so funny.
In Egypt, we had a Hungarian kind of train, which was really like a bullet train nowadays. But the train I had from King's Cross was really like a steam train from the past. I was really disappointed. And anyway, I got to Newark, small station, empty and cold. It was cold. It was the month of December.
And you were in summer clothes, I assume.
Well, of course, I didn't have heavy clothes. It took me years to accept that this country needs a heavy coat. So I had a light coat. And anyway, it was a very small train to take me from Newark to Lincoln. And when I got to Lincoln, it was dark, it was lonely. There was nobody there at 9:30. And remember, in Egypt, it's a 24-hour party. You had people open all the time. So I was very disappointed. Anyway, I landed in a good health hospital eventually.
How are you funding medical school?
Medical school in Egypt was free.
But when you got to the UK?
That was all. Oh, I came to the UK. You're not allowed to take more than 30 sterling pounds.
£30 in the pocket, that's it.
30. But 30, remember, at that time, the salary of a doctor was about £106
That's so
per
wild.
month. But still, £30 was not much. So I had to work in London. In the first 2 months,
Waiter?
First, you didn't know that. First, I did kitchen porter.
What's a kitchen porter?
Washing up the
A
dishes.
spaghetti house, no?
Well, it was the one behind. I think it
was Spaghetti. Do you remember
House.
Spaghetti House? Yeah.
Because the chef was a friend of mine, and he said, "Do you want to come just temporary?" And I thought, dishwashers, plates and spoons, and probably have a machine as well. But in fact, no. When you work as a kitchen porter, junior kitchen porter, remember, the other one who was there before you goes to the washing machine or dishwasher, and you go to the big saucepans. You are talking about big saucepans. You need a ladder to wipe it inside.
Did you already speak English, French, Arabic?
Some English. Arabic, of course, but some English, which I was a better communicator than anybody who didn't know English. So I could communicate and I could speak good English, actually, relatively speaking. I will articulate it that you think that I understand English. So I managed to get by very well. Anyway, I resigned. I walked out after 2 hours. I couldn't do that. And then I enlisted in a cleaner agency shop. So and I did some cleaning job. I enjoyed that, actually.
Dad loves it. He's like quite OCD about that stuff.
I'm a clean person.
He loves it. He loves it.
Well, I'm a Boy Scout. I was a Boy Scout, really.
Yeah.
So, that helped me a lot to understand many things in life. Anyway, and from there, I progressed into a waiter at Texas Pancake House, which was good. And I saved some money. On top of the £30, I think I managed to get it up to 100, 120. In a couple of months, it was not too bad. With the tips. And we encouraged the people who didn't pay tips to pay tips by singing to them after the service in French sometimes or in Spanish. There was a lovely Spanish boy with me. Anyway, but I was so pleased. I really appreciated the medical degree then. I really, really appreciate it. So when you do those other things, and I strongly recommend everybody to have a degree, because a degree really separates you from the big, big mass. Yes.
I disagree. Okay, so I'm going to disagree with you. Now, obviously, like growing up, my instilled values, and Payman, you can share your thoughts with your own children. It was instilled, you have to go to university. As my mum and dad always said, a degree is worth its weight in gold. However, as time has gone on, and I've told you this, I have met plenty of people who are more successful than people with degrees, especially in the business world, and some of them that have elevated more, and they would argue that degrees are useless and a waste of time. So I think it depends on the person and what they want to do. If you want to be a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer, etc., then of course it matters what degree that you do. But I think now people can be entrepreneurial online and very smart and very successful without having degrees.
I'd say education is less important than it was back in your day. I remember my dad said his degree from Belfast was like a ticket to printing money back home.
Yeah.
So it's that it's no longer like that. Yeah?
But what if your children said they didn't?
But with the kids, I almost see university as like a holiday or something. Yeah, like something they should be looking forward to. So if they decide they don't want to go, I'd say they're missing out on something.
Like a life experience.
The actual experience of it. And I know your college wasn't as fun as mine. Right? We had that episode.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I'd say they're missing out on just the experience of it. But I think you're right that you could give 3 years to something else.
I agree, but I also disagree. Just tell me, what are the percentage of people without a degree who can be something without going to university? Just a figure. In 100 person who are already around us, how many?
What do you think?
Percentage.
I mean, okay, yeah.
I actually want to Google it. I'm going to Google
lower
it.
Percentage.
Is 1% too little or too much?
No, too little. Yeah,
Really?
yeah, you could be super successful without a degree. You can.
More than 1%.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you can be super unsuccessful with a degree.
I agree. I think, listen.
So I've actually Googled it.
Yeah.
So it says, based on the findings, this is from entrepreneur.com, those who become highly successful without an education appear to be roughly 6%. But I don't know, that's entrepreneur.
Still, 94% who can make it. And among the entrepreneurs...
Well, no, but listen to this. The percentage of jobs, this is from Harvard Business Review, the percentage of jobs requiring a college degree fell from 51% in 2017 to 44% in 2021. So some people now are not requiring degrees.
Now. In my days, no.
No, that's right.
That's what he's saying.
In my days, it was different. Okay? So I agree. I was a frustrated entrepreneur. I could have gone into business straight away after secondary school. Now, secondary school is definitely
What did your dad do?
He was a civil servant. He was not really ambitious. He was happy and he wanted to have a pension. Yeah. And there are many people,
I think the
majority of people want a stable job and a salary. Not everybody is an entrepreneur. I'm not sure whether you can apply that to everyone. But, if you have an entrepreneurial skills, such as Zuckerberg, for example, I mean, he knew he had a talent.
Or Richard Branson.
Whatever, those are people who recognize themselves and got frustrated with education. I got frustrated with education initially because I was an entrepreneur. But how many business people succeed? How many earn that much?
But the thing is that the school and education system is extremely flawed because it's a one fits all kind of model. And also, but listen, as well, for example, when I was young at school, I struggled academically. I'm not talking about Queen's when I worked really hard and etc., but I struggled academically, and teachers didn't help my strengths. They would focus on my weaknesses. For example, I'm lucky because Queen's College, which was a school that I went to, it was more designed for the creative type of person, which then I could thrive in that environment better. But for example, the education system, Richard Branson, is he dyslexic? Or, he's dyslexic, you know. So he physically struggled to read and write, for example, but his skills, obviously he's an intelligent person in a different way.
Do you think it comes down, do you have any sort of feelings of you might not have become a dentist if you weren't groomed to become a dentist? And do you think that you would be something else that you'd rather be?
Well, my dad knows the story already. I mean, I was always good at drama and English literature. Do you remember? I was really good at that. And some of my English teachers even said, why don't you go to university and study English? Do you remember the teachers saying this? And they said, go to Oxford. Miss Carlier said that, go. Here we go. Look, it sounds like that. And my dad said, listen, don't waste your time. Do the dentistry, and you can always do English later.
Whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
But listen, you had a flair for dentistry.
Of course, I wanted to be a dentist since I was 12.
Yeah, I mean, you know, at 9, we visited my cousin in LA who was a successful dentist.
And I loved it.
And she loved it because, you know, she had a nice house and in Santa Monica in LA. And she immediately said, Dad, I want to be a dentist. And,
what kind of a kid was she?
Be honest.
She was a strong kid. She knew what she wanted.
A handful.
From 3 years old, she has a strong mind. That's what I want. Wow. She'd shout at me. So once I was shouting at her mom, and she was only a baby then. She was maybe 1 year plus. She shouted back at me. Wow. she said like that. She couldn't shout back, but she just made a noise to say that she didn't like what I said. She's always been strong, always been ambitious as well. I think the most important thing in life is to have to develop an ambition. You can't say, I'm studying this because and I don't know what I'm going to do at the end. I think it's always better to set up a goal and then you work towards this goal. About the education system, what I think I would have liked, if I would have known that I want to be a doctor at the age of 13, 14, I would rather have made that choice at that age. And there is a specialized school from then. I entered middle school then, because everything I studied then, from advanced maths to advanced chemistry, I mean, you need the basics, but you don't need the advanced one. I forgot all about it. Most of us forgot.
But people say, for example, that the things like the education system is extremely outdated, and I would agree as well. I agree. They said they don't teach you anything about taxes. They don't teach you anything about fertility.
Correct.
Yet they teach you Pythagoras' theorem. You know what I mean? And it's like, when have we ever used it?
They concentrate on the basics, and I think there is a reason for that. Very important reason, actually. You have to understand. They want you to be a researcher and advance your specialty. They don't want everybody just to open a clinic and just really carry on with what they're doing.
Yeah, but I'm talking about even like primary school and secondary school as well. Like, there's such a disconnect. Like, for example, people don't have a basic understanding, including dentists, about accounting, for example, taxes, things like this. We don't know. You know what I mean? You're meant to learn, and actually, those are important life skills and extremely helpful. Now, I want to talk to you, Dad, a little bit about your time as a junior doctor. As we know, junior doctors now, for the first time in many years, are speaking out about their experiences. NHS dentistry is also in a huge crisis. I haven't talked to you about it. As you know, I worked for many years on the NHS, 10 years. My dad made it very, very clear to me. He said, you do your time on the NHS, by the way. And a lot of dentists don't do that. But he said to me, you do your time on there. That's what he said.
We all have to do.
Yeah. A lot of people don't. They Payman
also. I didn't.
See, he didn't.
Really? Yeah.
So.
But it may be different in dentistry.
Why didn't you?
Because I didn't want a third party in between me and the patient.
But did you train before you came here? Sorry.
No, he trained in the UK. Yeah.
I trained here.
So you trained?
I trained here.
No, but he didn't have to work on the NHS. He did his train.
But you trained the NHS, you mean just 1 year?
So like VT, he's saying.
Oh, I did the 1 year, the VT.
Only 1 year?
Yeah. But I did university here, and then 1 year that you have to do.
Yes, but I think you can do that with dentistry, but you can't do it with medicine.
Yeah.
Because you need the experience.
I would say, and people might think that I'm quite bold saying this, but I would say arguably sometimes working in systems like that can actually de-skill you, because I did so many years using materials that the budget allowed for on the NHS system. So for example, like the silver fillings and all this stuff, that I actually didn't learn how to do like the white fillings and things like that. So actually my skills are much less than my colleagues that started doing that work. Of course you can do that kind of work within the healthcare system. It's just more limited.
You know,
Rhona,
young dentists ask me all the time, what should I do? Yeah. And a young doctor's probably asking you the same question, what should I do? And the normal advice is do 3-4 years on the NHS, learn your skill, sort of thing. Try lots of different things, see what you like, then start going into those things that you like. But my advice is kind of opposite. My advice is
don't stay in too long.
No, pick something, anything. Yeah, yes. Get good at something, and don't go into the NHS at all, because the standards are low on the NHS as far as materials, time that you're given, and so forth. In dentistry, it's not the same in medicine.
I agree. Well, no. Even in medicine, let me tell you also that I did general training for an average of 5 years until I got my membership.
Yeah.
During those 5 years of training, which I value very much, I worked so hard. I did a lot of operations, which made me a competent gynecologist, more than today's gynecologist. Sorry, today's gynecologist, but you don't do enough training, really, like what we did. But again, is that required? People then specialize. So we didn't have sub-specialization then.
Yeah.
So I had to start thinking about sub-specializing. So I actually started to develop some interest in 1973. During my NHS years, I developed an interest in ultrasound. Ultrasound was very early then. You could only see blips. You couldn't see a picture.
Uh-huh.
And we used big machines. Then from there, then I finished my membership in 1977. So I started 72. 5 years was the average. And then I thought I'm qualified. I thought I'm just done. Now I want to go out on my own to practice. It would have been wrong. Why? In the following 2 years, I've also learned additional surgical experience. I've also started to do real ultrasound. And then 2 years later, I thought, well, that's it. I have enough now. I can face the world alone. But I decided to take advanced 3 years in research at King's College and then learn more about ultrasound.
But was that based on the recommendation of your consultants?
No.
Okay, so you did that off
He
your own.
became an expert.
I did that because
You wanted to become an expert.
Well, I was planning to go back home and have a lot of experience, like what you did here, but you did that privately. So I did it in the NHS because there was nothing private. You had to work with the top people like Stuart Campbell that I worked with in ultrasound. And then eventually, when I really left the NHS and resigned completely in 1984, and then I went to the Middle East, I still developed. I worked in institutions where I had to teach myself fertility. So I became multitask. The problem, because I pursued a career which allows, in myself, I took it myself, like you. Now, today's doctors subspecialize 5 years after, and if you work in the NHS, you only work in one subject. They don't want you to be multitask anymore. So my time is different from this time, and that's the NHS. And
But let's talk a little bit about your junior doctor experience, because as I said to you, you qualified so many years ago, and I think the situation has somewhat got worse for junior doctors. And we're living, Gen Z and the millennials, they're much more outspoken. But do you think...
I think that's the thing. I don't think the situation's got worse.
But
the situation was very hard for junior doctors.
Do you think... So what kind of things...
It wasn't easier. It was harder.
Yeah.
They should do more work.
But that's the thing. So talk us through the kind of things that happened to you.
Let me tell you then. So my initial years as a senior house officer was I had to be on call 1 and 2. And sometimes 1 and 2, you're talking obstetrics, you're up all nights. And when my colleague, one of my colleagues went off, they couldn't find the locum. They said, "Do you mind to cover 1 in 1?" Being a young hero, I did for 15 days straight.
Oh my God!
They said we will pay you, but then in fact I wasn't paid because they said we can't find how to pay you because you're not allowed to do overtime. And I accepted then because I was grateful for the system teaching me.
This is such an interesting point because for me now, and I want you to chime in as well, a lot of people, they say that the new generation don't want to work as hard. They very much say, this is the hours I want to do. They come to job interviews now and they actually say, so this, even I've seen it within my own clinic, whether it's dentist, auxiliary staff, they decide what hours they want to work. They also very much prioritize their lifestyle because they don't want to be burnt out, they don't want to be tired, etc. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because people
I think it's a good thing.
See, my dad's doing this, right? And I think because also I am the kind of person that, you know, my first NHS practice, I was on £8.75 a UDA. Some of my friends were on way more, but I just accepted it. And if they wanted me to do overtime, I accepted it. And if they wanted me to do Saturdays, I accepted it. Do you see what I mean? Whereas now people would argue.
I think the thing is, it doesn't go with running a super efficient business to have people who are only in 1 day a week or 2 days a week, especially in the mixed practices, right? And so I know loads of principles of mixed practices. When a young dentist comes and says, I want to do 3 days a week.
And they do, you know, now.
And self-care and whatever. They don't like that. Yeah.
We couldn't do that in our time.
Yeah, but now.
I couldn't have
But what do you think about now?
I couldn't have driving lessons even really to commit, because I finished, you know, later than you know, the time. And many times I said, you know, do you off mind if I go because I have a driving lessons? But, you know, you're doing surgery at 6:30, 7 o'clock, so we had to stay.
But do you think it's better now that people, including medical
I think
professionals...
it's better. I would like to be a junior doctor now. However, the system was much more forgiving. The people were lovely. There was no complaints then.
Oh, yeah.
If things went wrong, you say, oh, don't worry, doctor. Things sometimes go wrong. So we had a culture of forgiveness and
Was
kindness.
the GMC around then?
I like that culture better then.
Was the GMC around then?
Of course. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely around.
But was it less of a complaint culture with the GMC?
Less of a complaint.
I think obs and gynaes.
They appreciated doctors more.
Obs and gynaes get sued more than all other doctors, don't they?
One of the highest.
One of the highest.
Really? More than plastics?
Because it's kids involved, right? So when something goes wrong, people want to find.
They are in the first three of, you know, worst subspecialty.
Is that why you gave up obstetrics?
Absolutely.
So talk us.
Your insurance, I would have had to pay 100,000 back in 1999 per year.
Goodness.
Nowadays they pay 250,000. And
Just to do it.
They get sued more than we do.
That's why if you want to have a baby privately now, they would want you to put down payment at the Portland of 30,000 before you enter the hospital.
Okay, so my question for you is, and obviously you don't have to answer if it's too difficult, but did you ever have an incident where a baby died when you delivered the baby?
Yes, of course.
How did that impact you?
I've had incidents when a baby died. I had an incident at the time when a mother died also.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the first one was devastating, of course. It's just terrible. I had to go on holiday the following day. I couldn't face it. Young, and she had severe preeclampsia. So that must have happened 1974. So I was about maybe 26, really young, and it affected me. But you had the support. The family also consoled you. You did everything you could. You know, I had to do once a hysterectomy in the ward because she was bleeding too. You know, she had conditions which we did not recognize then. Placenta accreta. She also died. A baby died from a very easy delivery, very, very easy delivery. And then after 3 days, he just died. And then when the coroner did the autopsy, there was a bit of blood in the brain. You would think it's traumatic because the delivery was traumatic, but the delivery wasn't traumatic. And then when I asked the coroners, how often do you see blood in the brain in babies in general, delivered? It's not uncommon. So, but again, you feel guilty all the time.
But we feel guilty as dentists. Payman works with one of the top dentists in the UK, and I know how it feels. We'll have sleepless nights over a margin. Do you know what I mean? On a tooth. Do you see what I mean? We'll think about it, or a shade match or something like that. But then you hear this,
It's normal. It will be unusual not to get upset. We get upset even when we have a complaint. Where did I go wrong?
Was it those events that you said I want to stop obs, or was it more the complaint side of things that made you want to stop obstetrics?
No. I loved obstetrics all the way. It was age. I was past 50 by then.
Wow.
I knew I couldn't carry any longer. Getting up during the night, you actually sleep on edge. Half asleep, you're waiting for a call. And to be honest, at that time, I decided that I'm going to stay with my patients in the hospital if I had a private obstetrics. until she's delivered. So I looked after her because I couldn't wait to go to bed and then wake up again and wake up. So imagine how many nights like that. So I gave it up, and for the insurance as well. And I decided to become only gynecologist then.
So, doctor, tell me about when you made the decision to leave the NHS.
This is so interesting, by the way. Also, I want to, before he talks about the decision to leave the NHS, I want to like rewind a little bit because people are very interested in my childhood. I got trolled the other day on TikTok. I didn't tell you or you, but basically someone said this woman is lying about her success because her father is a multi-millionaire gynecologist who paid for everything and bought her clinic and everything in it. Can we just have it on her? Did you buy me my clinic,
Not
Dad?
at all.
Exactly. And you're not.
Rhona Eskander did everything herself. Trust me. Rhona Eskander, she worked 3 years in the NHS.
Not 3 years. I did 8 years.
Well, whatever. In the first 3 years in the NHS, where she worked, she was earning 42,000 a year, and I'm saying it really in front of everybody. She came after 3 years, she said, Dad, I managed to save £80,000 because I want to buy a flat.
And I did it myself.
And trust me, in these 3 years,
I didn't do anything. I just saved.
I did not help her rent. I couldn't help her for anything.
University, that's what I say. You paid for my education.
Yes.
That is in school,
Yes.
etc. But then after university, I was done, right? I saved everything myself.
And I'm not a multi-millionaire at all.
There we go.
At all. I couldn't afford, to be honest. I had one policy always with them since she was very young, her or her sister.
See?
I gave you a pocket money from the 2 years of age, I think.
3.
I gave them a weekly pocket money, and I said, well, it's up to you to save or to spend. They've always spent it. It doesn't really matter. But they've learned the value of money from a young age.
Since I was 3.
And then during education, then they got used to that pocket money. It was a trick to also bargain with education. If you don't do your homework, there's no pocket money this week. I'm terribly sorry.
So did you work as well?
No.
Because for me...
Just saved. You were a good saver.
No, I was a good saver, but I was a really good saver. Remember, I don't drink.
No.
So when people were spending loads of money on drinking, I think I saved a lot of money on no alcohol because I just don't drink. I think that also the other thing is, like you said, like I remember I was only 2 or 3, but I really remember it. Dad sat me down, we just had bath time, and he goes, I'm going to give you something called pocket money. You're going to get 1 dinar, because we lived in Bahrain, by the way, at this point.
Equivalent to £2.
And then, so my dad went to the Middle East. It's quite interesting, because I want him to tell you why he went to the Middle East and how his experience was. That's when he met my mum. But even more interestingly is when we came back to the UK, there was huge financial struggle. Because I remember we went to Asda, and we weren't allowed to buy buy normal Coca-Cola, because
I only bought Asda Cola.
You bought Asda Cola because we couldn't afford it. So I think that's quite interesting.
But look, I think the conversation needs to be had, that if you were a multimillionaire, and there are plenty of people who are multimillionaires whose kid might be a dentist, that still doesn't mean there's anything less about your achievement.
No.
Your achievement of what you've managed to do, whether or not there was money at the beginning or not, the achievement is its own achievement. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
So I can understand if someone said your dad's multimillionaire and that's not true.
Yeah.
It's not true.
You want to set
annoying.
that record straight.
Yeah.
But if my dad was a multimillionaire and he helped me start Enlighten, great. Yeah. The last 23 years of ups and downs and all of that, or my own work or whatever. But the person who started out rich or started out poor, it makes no difference. We all have our life struggles to get through.
Yeah.
And even the poorest person in the UK isn't one of the richest people on the world global scale. So it depends on how you're comparing.
And also how many millionaires' children have made it. A lot of them are failures as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's more difficult.
Many can never get their own achievements recognised.
But trust me, I only paid for education. Her mother paid her also for her private
But that's the thing. Let's go a little bit into that. So why did you move to the Middle East? So you were working in the UK. You were 38.
So I was multitask. And really, I knew now by then, I had a lot of experience. I had colposcopy behind my wings. I had ultrasound experience, all advanced. I had advances keyhole surgery, and you're talking about 1984, not nowadays. And then, you know, I had some fertility experience. But to be honest, by 84, I was so tired. And also the competition was different. When you applied for consultant jobs, you know, there was another 100 applicants with you as well to apply. And you had to really be shortlisted. And I was shortlisted a few times, but I couldn't just go through the bottleneck one more time. And I said, I just need a break. And everybody was having fun. It was a party in the Middle East. And also, I went...
But also, can you be honest that there were too many women in the UK and you couldn't settle down?
I couldn't settle... No, not because of too many women. I couldn't settle with the person that I wanted to be with.
Too much choice.
What does that mean?
Maybe. London is distracting.
See, distracting. There you go.
London is distracting, and I tell you, so there are not many loving relationships. Many people.
Can you imagine this was in the 80s and the same thing?
Well, it still is. A lot of people find it difficult to find a loving relationship. So you can be friends.
Do you feel that a lot of women talk to you about that in the clinic? Like, as in, there's a lot of women.
They tell me exactly that. You can have sex, a lot of sex in London, but you can't have too much, many love.
Why do you think that is?
I think this is the way people are. You know, people are just more focused on their career now. They're not really ready to have a family until later in life. And that's when we talk about egg freezing. It's a fact. Most people don't have children in my clinic by the age of 33. To be fair, maybe 35 even.
But my question for you is not so much that part, but why do you think they say they struggle to find a decent partner?
But Rhona, do you agree that these days getting married for a man is a lot less interesting than it was 20 years ago?
That's also a point. Yes, he's got many choices and he doesn't have to commit himself. But also, I think men get worried about litigation. The law stands more with women than men. It's against men.
Yeah. It's maybe the worst thing that can happen to a man.
They are at a disadvantage.
Do you know what's so funny? My fiance said the other day, this is going to make you laugh, he was getting so stressed about the civil ceremony. And I was like, don't stress. I was like, it's fine. Like, we're going to get the date when we get the date. And he goes, you don't understand. If the papers aren't signed, I'll have no rights to the baby. And I was like, I would never do that to you. I would never do that to him. Like, we have such a strong relationship. But I think, like, men subconsciously do worry. And like one of my best friends.
Would you sign a prenup?
A prenup. I wouldn't mind a prenup. You know, I was listening to a really amazing podcast. I'm going to send it to you. Lex Friedman and James Sexton. Have you listened to it?
No.
It is phenomenal. The podcast basically is the biggest divorce lawyer in America. And he talks about everything. So in this podcast, he basically talks about prenups and everything like that. He goes, everyone gets so upset about a prenup. Oh, do they love me? He goes, it is just an insurance policy. He goes, I tell you, even the people that you see, all the celebrities that pretend they haven't had a prenup, he goes, 90% have had a prenup. And then he goes on to say, one of the most interesting things about the prenup is that a lot of people are obsessed with putting an infidelity clause. So whether it's either party, they say the prenup will only apply if there's no infidelity, right? But he says if you put an infidelity clause, it just makes it more interesting for the lawyers because he discourages them. Because what defines infidelity? Texting someone, even if they say, oh, look, here's the hotel room, he was in the hotel with the room, how can you prove something happened? Do you see what I mean? So it becomes very difficult to prove what is actually, and you start getting into the nitty gritty.
But would you worry? So if your fiance's, pulled out a piece of paper and said,
I wouldn't worry.
You'd be calm.
But I think that's because I'm not financially driven when it comes to my choice of partner. And I think the same goes his way, like with me and him. And again,
But I've had friends where I've said to them, I've recommended, hey, get a prenup, and they say, I can't.
Does it work?
I can't even bring it up.
But does it work?
Yeah, well, according to Rolanda,
does a prenup work?
Yes.
Well, I don't know the law in the UK. Who knows? But they can't even bring it up with their fiance because bringing it up
brings an argument.
My
dad has a friend. I'm not going to mention her name, but the daughter called off the wedding because the guy wanted a prenup.
Yeah.
Remember? You know who I'm talking about? She called off the wedding.
Yes.
She called it off.
He was American. She was English, and she called off the wedding, and has to withdraw all the invitations.
You have to think about.
Which I think
You have to think about that. What was?
No, but But I think it was fair from the guy. He had a lot of wealth and she didn't have any wealth. It's fine to
No, I think it's... But listen, I've had... Can I be completely transparent with you?
Sure.
My clinic is my clinic. I've worked so damn hard for that clinic. No matter who I marry, I still want my clinic to be my clinic.
Yes.
What we build together thereafter during the wedding, do you see what I mean? Also, what he has got... I don't expect to just take that for what he has worked for hard for prior to me. Do you understand what I'm saying? Us together is a different thing, but you know, like immediately, as you know, in a separation, they get 50% of everything, including what you had before. So I think it's like you have these discussions, and as you know, it's a bit like getting into disputes with business partners. It's much easier to have the conversations when you love each other and care about each other. Like doing a shareholders agreement, for example, from the beginning. Set the boundaries.
What you've done before is yours.
It's correct. I mean, that's what I believe.
A friend of mine, whom you know very well, is going through divorce at the moment.
Really?
Her lawyers, they want him to declare what he had inherited from his parents. So they're going after his parents' properties as well. Who died?
Lawyers love to get the money, right? And wherever the money is, they will go after that.
They will just want to know, and they will have a go. They will have a go.
Yeah. So
I'm sorry, I have to write my property to the dog charity.
Lol. Okay. So Dad. So anyway, so you were there, but this made me laugh so much. He actually really wanted to get married at 38, and he decided because
37.
There was no. Can you believe I'm going to be 37 on Wednesday?
Congratulations.
I'm so depressed. I feel so old.
Oh, Rhona, if you don't say it, nobody will know. But it doesn't really matter.
I know, because people still think I'm young.
She just told 10,000 people.
Yes. Yes.
10,000 people listen to this podcast. Anyway, listen. So the other thing that I wanted to say to you is now my age thing. Yeah, so he said there was no Tinder, he said that he put out an advert on the Yellow Pages describing a secretary that he wanted, but basically his perfect woman.
Well, when I didn't really find the one I really, really want, I said, but why don't you interview people, but not for marriage, but as a secretary? So I plan to take up a suite in the Hilton, Cairo. and you know, at that time, and I was close now in Saudi Arabia, I was close to Cairo, and I plan to have a secretary with all the specification what I want. And in fact, a lot of it applies to my wife. So she has to speak.
He manifested her.
She has to speak Arabic and as well as English, French as well will be an advantage. American University of Cairo educated.
It's my mum, but she was Lebanon, yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, but I met my wife without the advert, and just before that I met my wife. And it was an interesting point because I was going to advertise for a secretary and I was going to choose one of them then to be my wife. But it didn't happen. I didn't have to go through that. But it was a fun...
that was your version of Tinder.
It was a fun experience to go through it.
So how was Saudi when you went? Because he was in Saudi then in the 80s then. How was it?
Saudi was very primitive and very Islamic. You know, it's all Wahhabis and they had their own rules.
Yeah.
And... but I worked.
You know, like no
I
drinking,
worked in
nothing.
the American, in the Arabian American oil company called Aramco.
Yeah.
And Aramco had a walled village of 60,000 people from the States, from the whole Arab world, from England, from Canada as well. So I lived among a foreign international community, and the hospital was advanced, so I could use all the skills. So we had ultrasounds, we had colposcopy, we had everything. So I was happy there.
Is that where you met Rhona's
That's
mom?
where I met my wife, yeah. My wife, I saw her in the streets of Khobar, which is just outside Aramco. And I said, my God, this is my woman.
Can you imagine?
She loved to hear that on broadcast. I really said it, and I just fell in love with her. Just walking the streets with a modest cover. She looked incredible.
Bright green eyes.
Yeah, 3 days later, I met her in the hospital, and I just sat close to her so she can notice me in the dining room. And then I moved on to a friend who happened to, she knew as well. She also came for me as well on that table because she also admired me. So it was, and you know, which is great. You know, I love it when a woman. My advice to women: if you like a man, go for him. You know, because men are generally men are generally shy, and they love the woman who chooses them as well.
But you know, it's interesting that you say that because I have a friend of mine. You know, my best friend. Her new boyfriend chased her. And he said he finds it a complete turn off when a woman approaches him, or when a woman, he finds it a turn off because he likes to feel alpha and macho and like he's done the choosing. But having said that, do you know, sorry Dad, I'm going to break it to you.
Is he a Russian?
No, he's not. He's not Russian at all. But he's pretty modern, but isn't like, he just doesn't like that. The other thing is, my sister, you probably know this well, my sister, if she likes someone, she makes it known. She will even give her phone number on a piece of paper.
Yeah. But
and it's worked out for her perfectly.
Yes, but it's not for a one night stand. That's wrong. It's really, there has to be an attraction and a love and a relationship.
But do you not think men like to chase?
What's wrong with the one night stand?
What's wrong?
Everything wrong.
Go on.
Don't say that on a podcast.
No, it's wrong. It's wrong. There's no, really, a sexual relationship is fantastic within a loving relationship.
But some people
like to have... If
have...
there's no emotions and love, well, it's just attraction, it's just beauty. And to be honest, it's all the same. If there's no love, it's all the same.
But the thing is, some people might say that they enjoy one night stands because they feel empowered and that they feel that they are in their sexual element. I don't know. I've never had one, so I don't know.
It's not me. I mean, as I said, I'm just one
but
kind.
It's personal choice, I think.
Which I don't really... Well, from my experience, I never enjoyed it. Really hard. I'm sorry for all the girls that I had to be with. There was some attraction, of course, but I had to really develop some attraction and understanding and some love which you
I'm the same, as in, like, I feel that to really like someone, it has to always be emotional connection. Yes. It's emotional connection first before physical. But that's the case for women. Women always need an emotion. I'm not sure anymore. What do you think?
No, I think that traditionally that was the case. I think there is something about women that leans them that way.
Different, yeah.
Yeah, women and men are different.
Yes.
But I know plenty of men who say exactly what you said.
Yes.
And I know plenty of women who are up for lots of one-night stands.
Yes, correct. Because they don't want to be committed.
And it's a good thing. I feel like it's a good thing nowadays.
I was a romantic guy when I was young in the NHS, and I tried to fall in love many times. The girls didn't like it. Oh, you're too serious.
Yeah, exactly.
So I gave up eventually.
I think nowadays also women do complain that they want to have a really loving, emotionally available person, but then they always classically go for like the guy that isn't that, do you know, and then they start complaining. You know, there is something to blame. And I definitely went through a period where I realised I was the common denominator in my bad situations because I was choosing the wrong men subconsciously.
Men, I remember.
Like choosing the wrong men subconsciously. And actually I looked at it and I was like, you know what, like my parents are like the beacon of like healthiness, and my partner now, who was emotionally unavailable, but there was a change there, definitely like reflects more of, you know, what I have grown up with.
Doctor, you've been married how many years?
1985.
1985, so
30.
Coming close to 40 years.
40,
I think 38, 39.
Do you still love her as much as you did back then?
Just as much.
But what's the secret?
And, you know, my wife also just loves
What's the secret? Because you know, 40 years is a long time. And so...
Constant forgiveness. Do we pick her? We pick her all the time. Somebody said, and I said all the time. But you know what? Because there is love, we forget really and forgive within... Now I am 24, 48 hours, but I used to be 14, 15 days of sulking as well in the past. But my wife, 5 minutes. 5 minutes, and I can feel, and you know.
What do you think as well? Because Mum used to tell me as well, like in the early stages of your relationship, that one thing that was difficult for her, which you might not know about, is there were women constantly trying also to deter your attention away from her, and there was like, you know what women get like.
I know.
And Mum found that difficult. But what do you think that also within that relationship, because a lot of people, like a mistake that happens is they get so comfortable in relationships that they do start to cheat on their partner, or they lose interest because, as you know, relationships go through different stages, from the 2-year to the 5-year to the 10-year. So what do you think also held you together? My mum's a bit of a...
I mean, I have a theory which not many women are going to agree about, really.
What?
I have a feeling that men are hypersexual in general. Mm-hmm. They just really more sexually easily aroused and attracted, and they're very vulnerable and weak because of that until they get into their 40s and 50s, and sometimes even carry on. They are just vulnerable. Women, you know, they're more emotionally driven, so they're not. But I mean, a lot of women will disagree.
Well, on an evolutionary level, you know, a woman cannot be as careless as a man.
Correct.
Because, you know, the consequences are
Correct.
a child,
correct.
right?
You know, many men really don't care whether they don't know whether they can make you pregnant or not. Very few are responsible.
Very few, of course. We know
Very
that.
few.
Yeah, very.
Only the women have to be responsible. It's not fair.
Okay, so tell us your point then.
That was
So
it.
my point is that men will be easily attracted to women.
But then how did mum keep
because
it-
they are inherently like that. Women are not. They're more emotionally driven. Unless they feel that they become less attractive, they become egotistic, they want the attraction, they want to know they're desired as well. And that happens to women after a long, boring message and where everything became just really a routine. I think the secret of a loving relationship is to forgive the man more, and the man has to forgive the woman, but it's always very difficult. And men usually don't forgive very much, but they have to forgive. So it's a matter of forgiving even if there was infidelity.
So this is so
How
interesting
interesting, because you and Shivani spoke about this.
Because the long loving relationship should conquer that.
So one thing that I would say to you is again, in the James Sexton podcast, which you should definitely listen to, the first question that's asked by clients when they find out about infidelity, the men ask, did you have sex with him?
Yes.
The woman asks, do you love her? So that's the first question.
Correct.
So when a woman finds out her husband cheated, is do you love her? When a man finds out his wife has cheated, he says, did you have sex with him? And it's quite interesting to see that like psychology of difference.
Correct.
You know, when it comes to that, because you can see then where the importance lies.
Such an unfair question. You're not even married yet. But if it did happen to you,
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
would you have hard and fast rules, or would you take your dad's
No,
advice?
I think that I wouldn't have hard and fast rules, and I would probably get annihilated. Shivani would definitely annihilate me for this. But I think that, like, hearing stories from my dad also about the patients that he gets in his clinic, there's complications, right? Like, my dad might diagnose, for example, a sexually transmitted disease, and the partner's like, but I don't get it, how could I have got a disease, I've only been with my partner? And then there's like these difficulties, etc. And he talks about like the nuances of relationships. My honest answer would be I don't know until I'm in that situation. And I think we pass too much judgment.
I think, look, you draw a hard line at infidelity. Infidelity can be psychological.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thinking about someone.
Yeah.
Well,
think
listen,
about someone for
yes,
a week.
but you know,
You've
but
been
if he's
really
in
hard.
love, that's it. Fine, you can go with her if you are in love. But if it was only a matter of sexual encounter, one night stand, and I was wrong, quite honestly, I wouldn't destroy my marriage for that. You know,
I think it really depends on the situation that you're in. And as you said, if it happens like multiple times. And the difficulty is, I mean, I talked about Esther Perel. Have you ever listened to her? Oh, she's brilliant. She's, again, a psychologist, and she does a lot. She's French, so obviously very, you know, she's very open to infidelity.
Open. Yeah.
But Esther Perel talks about infidelity, and she also talks about how a lot of couples try to come back from it. But she says the biggest judgment, what's interesting, because she goes into different types, what's interesting is that back in the day, as you know, both of your generation and your generation, you're not as old as my dad, but still, if people got cheated on, people would judge you for leaving. That's what they would say. But nowadays, people judge you for staying. And I thought that was an interesting point, because what she's saying is that, like, people...
you mean if you forgive and stay in the relationship?
Nowadays, yes.
Nowadays, people blame
But
you
in the
for it.
past,
And they will
you were
judge you.
judged. Yes, but in the past, they
Judge
would...
you as being a nice person
Because
or
you
a
remember
fool?
what a stigma, even when I was growing up, having people that had divorced parents was such a stigma. Oh my God.
Not anymore.
Yeah, not anymore. You know what I
but
mean?
They're not totally happy children as well. There are
No, I think it depends, Dad, because there's a lot of co-parenting, there's a lot of healthy conversations, you know, the life has changed, etc.
Do you know anyone who has an open relationship?
Polyamorous relationship.
Yeah.
No, do you get clients with polyamorous relationships?
It's very much more common these days.
Yeah, it is.
polyamorous means...
Like, say, for example, it's consensual. Like, so say like...
So like husbands share two husbands.
Yeah, but then
couples.
you're couples, but you might go to sex parties together. You might have
No,
orgies.
you don't have to. You agree that you don't have to.
You agree that it's not complete monogamy, but you still come home together.
Of course.
You know?
I've had
They call
one that I know, and she said she was much happier. They're both much happier than before. You know,
Interesting.
Their marriage was really on a
Monogamish.
verge of a
Yeah.
breakup. Now they are very close, and they really enjoy the company of this couple.
Because they still come home to each other and love each other. I mean, that's a whole different topic, but quickly, I want to get over, like, so then you were in Saudi, because I want to go back onto that topic. You were in Saudi, then you decided to come back to the UK for what reason?
Yes, I want to add one point. There are two cultures now about what we've just said. So I have people from the Gulf, okay, because I see them more, okay, and they have
in London,
and they have a loving relationship. They are intellectuals and above middle class, and they come sometimes. I mean, I hope I don't offend, obviously, that come. They know their husband cheats. They know, and they forgive them completely. And sometimes they come.
But you don't think that's
they
because
come for an STG screen because they want to make sure he hasn't passed an STG trial. It's totally forgiving. Are they happy? So happy.
But do you not think that's like a cultural thing? It's a cultural thing.
So we go back to culture. Yes, but here it will not be acceptable. They cut off the relationship.
Yeah.
But to me, ask me, I have the two in front of me, face cam, who's happy, who's more happy? The Saudi who did not break her relationship, and she accepts it as men are men, doctor.
But you don't know if she's very happy, actually happy.
I know they are very happy because they've been a long time with me. I know.
Okay, fine. Now.
So let's now to Saudi. What made me come back?
Yeah, so you wanted us to grow up in a more democratic society as two girls?
Yes. I mean, this is a very important point and a message to everybody who is outside their homeland. It doesn't have to be England. But I'm going to say home is home. Home is where you grow. Home is where you can make your wealth and your future. So if you decide to stay longer as an expatriate, and I've seen a lot of examples like that, you have to find out where you're going to educate your children, and most of the time your children are going to leave you and go into a private boarding school in England or in America, and if you decide to educate them, for example, in Dubai, sooner or later you or them have to leave. And if you decide to stay, well, it's not easy. Dubai is not their homeland. They don't have a Dubai or Emirati passport. I actually mainly left, even though I had a license to practice in Dubai, I left because of the children's future. I mean, really, this was the most important and most successful decision I made from my life, because they remain to be British. I wanted them to adapt to the British culture, and I wanted them to make their future here. And I'm happy about that decision.
So when we came to London, I remember us struggling a lot financially. I just remember that we couldn't, as I said, afford normal coat. We would go to Asda. I wasn't allowed to buy anything expensive, etc. I remember mum crying all the time, and I remember being dragged around train stations and having to see my dad in Eastbourne.
Now this is despite full employments in the
but
NHS.
Why did we have such little money?
It's just not enough. It's not little money. The salary isn't enough. Doctors are not well paid, I have to say. But
this was worse back then.
Well, even now, I think, to be honest, people do struggle. They have a regular job, regular salary, but they work very hard, and it's never been enough.
And also, my mum wasn't working at the time, so what happened was...
Well, even when she worked, she had to pay all her salary and even more for your private schooling.
So basically what happened was that my dad got offered by his friend a house in Swiss Cottage, and my dad said, okay, fine, we'll go and move in there. Mum couldn't work at the time because her degree wasn't valid in the UK. She went to King's College to see if she could revoke her degree, and she was like, this is a joke, as in the train, because she was a Berkeley graduate, my mum. So my dad was slogging it out.
Berkeley, California?
Yeah. My mum went to Berkeley.
She has a master's degree from Berkeley Nutrition.
Yeah, so then basically my dad ended up working really hard. Then we went to go visit the state schools. I'll never forget, around Swiss Cottage in that area. Horrendous. And there were literally people at knife point, in the playground.
Well,
awful, yeah.
Actually, it's not fair. We don't know really. But, I just said, listen, we can't afford a private school.
Yeah, but we went, and my mum took one look and was like, I'm not sending the kids here. It was really rough back then. It's not like it is now.
Rhona, when I spoke to the administrator, she said, are you joking? You want them to come this year? There's a waiting list of about 2 to 3 years. You have to put your name down.
Yeah.
And I said, what? I thought, but inner London school is inner London, like inner New York, like any other place. So that's why people go and live.
We came mid-year because of a revolution in Iran, and No one would take us except
Yes,
this one
yes.
Catholic
Really?
school.
But they still...
They're saying the Catholic school took us.
Well,
Yeah.
Rhona, listen, I mean,
Yeah.
at the end, Tanya did go to Camden School for
Well,
Girls,
so this is the interesting thing. So then what happened was my mum was like, right, I can't do this. So she got a job in retail. Was it Marie Claire at the time, her first job?
A number of...
Loads of like
sales
retails, and
became a
basically
manager
every
eventually.
single bit of money she got, she put us to go to private school. The really hilarious thing was though, is that like, this is so typical, they couldn't afford to buy the uniform. You know how expensive private school uniform is, right? So we had to buy it from the
So expensive.
so expensive. We had to buy it from the charity of the school, basically. And then I got bullied from like the school kids for
Did
having
you? I didn't know that.
because they had like
Oh.
little holes in them and stuff
Sorry,
like that.
darling.
Yeah,
So sorry.
Daddy, don't be silly. But the point is, it drove me because
Yeah.
I so wanted the kids and the parents of those kids to accept me. Do you see what I mean? So I was like, I'm going to make sure that I work really hard, and we're not going to get to where like we can work really hard. But also, my dad, as I said, he wasn't home much because he was doing all these shifts.
I was
like,
in tears all the time. You don't know that.
oh.
I was depressed and I was in tears. And I just couldn't believe it. Is that what I really aspire to be?
Yeah.
Honestly, a doctor with a membership and all this training I did. And I just can't, I haven't got enough money. I mean, never mind holidays. We had 3 stars and 4 stars holiday eventually. But even the food, I had to memorize how much everything on the shelf at Asda. Not even Waitrose was a dream, I couldn't go to Waitrose, Anyway, so I had to. We struggled, but it was worth it because it's your home country, and I must admit, I love this country. I think it gave me a lot of strings. The people are wonderful here.
But Payman obviously similarly. I mean, he came to the UK a lot younger, but he came from
Where were you born?
Revolution. He
Iran,
came during
I
the
guess.
revolution.
Yeah.
So
but you agree with me? This is a very welcoming country with a big heart.
Yeah. I think the compared to a lot of Europe, for instance,
yes,
people here are much more open. Although these days
populism's
come into play.
But however, there was racism. There's no doubt about it. There was racism at the time. But nowadays, really, I think the younger generation are. The whole country has made a U-turn better than many other countries. And my advice as well. They expect you to develop your own economy as a person. In other words, you can't just go to a British institution and get a top job because, the local also has worked very hard to reach that job. So I've learned that at a later stage. As long as you look for yourself and become an entrepreneur and add to the country, you're fine. But if you want to find a job in a top position and you were born abroad, it's not fair for the locals.
I was at...
you agree?
Yeah, I was at I think it's changed a lot now. So I was on elective in San Francisco.
Yes.
And the dean of the university would take all the elective people to lunch. And the dean was black and gay. Because it was San Francisco, right?
Yes.
And I remember, and this was 94, 95, it was, not that many years ago. I remember thinking, there's no way the dean of our dental school could have been black or gay. Yeah, because it was a simple, white man, the kind of person you demand. But these days things have changed. Things have changed.
Interesting.
And for the better in that respect, I'd say.
So I wanted to say, so now that's that, but obviously Payman wanted to get into that question. How did you end up in private practice? And do you want to tell him about the shampoo business?
Yes. At the end of the day, I couldn't go on and on like that. And because I've already left the system, the medical system, and moved abroad, nobody in the NHS was going to give me a permanent post in London, especially. That's where I wanted to be.
Can you imagine? It's like a ladder. It's like a little community.
Yes, obviously, those who stayed in the system, they were more worthy of a permanent job. And I wouldn't have got a job in London. So I decided I'm just going to give it another 6 months.
How old were you?
Well, no, actually before that. So at that time, I was about maybe 48, 49. But I said, okay, the best way to be in the NHS, and the money isn't enough, is to try to develop your entrepreneurial skills and find other business to do at the time when you're off. And when was I off? I was off from 6 p.m. till 8 a.m. the following day, every day. And I was off 1 in 3 weekends at the time. So I said, well, I'm going to use that to just build another business, get people to work, and I can get extra money. All what I wanted really was another 20,000, 30,000 pounds on the side just to keep our life going. So I thought I went to a lot of exhibitions in Olympia, in Wembley, to get some ideas. And I decided, since I am a gynecologist, I'm going to develop cosmetic business for women. So I went to a lab, we developed our type of shampoo and conditioners and all that. And I spent about good 6 months going forwards and backwards to a lab in Colchester. And as I went to now that the product is finished now, we've decided about everything. It's a lot of hard work, I tell you, in business. Girls, and boys and girls, it's not easy in business because you are competing with big company, which I didn't accept. I thought I would do even better than them. Don't be a fool.
We've all been there, right?
Don't be a fool, really. You're not going to do better than people who's been in the business for years, like Lancome and and all that. So, and I went with the checkbook in my jacket to pay the first consignment of 10,000 bottles. And to my good luck, you will not believe it, the factory was closed by Her Majesty's order. Only really that weekend they started to close it. And then they came running to me. They said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll find another lab." I said, "When you find it, I pay." I escaped just really by the hair. By what? The expression?
Yeah, by a hair, yeah.
Yeah, but just by thin. Anyway, I escaped. However, I decided to give up the shampoo then, and I was very lucky. And then I decided to look at other business.
Soups.
I said food. And at that time, soups.
Do you remember that one? Was it Covent Garden Soup? They used to have the shops, yeah.
Soups were coming up, but in fact, I was really only the second person in the country to think of soups as fast food. And I thought, I'm going to squeeze in between McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken, and I'm going to make people eat healthy. Well, I didn't realize that people don't eat healthy. People want to feel full. That's why Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's succeed, with due respect to the both institutions. And I developed the soups, and then he said to me, no. And then I decided this time to take the advice of a business consultant. And that is my advice to anybody who's listening. Before you start a business, and do you agree, Rhona? Business consultant?
I mean, but this is what I said to you, like, Prav has been so invaluable. Like, it's so funny because Rolanda, my accountant, she's like, so I don't understand. She was like, is a business consultant someone that you call for like shoulder to cry on? I was like, well, he is my shoulder to cry on. I was like, but he's also strategic. He's been through things. Like, do you know what I mean? I think it's like invaluable, but I also advocate coaches and all this for everything. I had a love coach for my relationship. You know what I mean? I believe in a love coach. Amazing. She was brilliant.
You did very well with this advice. So I went actually to a business consultant, not because I had the money to pay for a business consultant for 10 sessions. Actually, the Labour government at the time offered business advice for free for any project which is going to be turnover over 100,000. And of course, my soup business was going to turn over 100,000 because I planned to have it all over the world. So I went with my business plan, and funny enough, also I made the guy, the business consultant, to sign a secrecy agreement. That's how much I believed in the soups. Anyway, he signed, and then I gave him the idea, and then we kept working out the figures. The figures were terrible. After the 6 sessions, he told me, you have 60% chance that you will close after 1 year completely and lose your capital of 100,000 initially of the equipments. The other 40%, you only have 10% chance to make 60,000 pounds a year, 10%. And the other 30%, my chances were to make 40,000 pounds a year at best, providing I have experience at a fast food restaurant like McDonald's, me and my wife for 6 months. And then I have to be prepared to work the first year, both of us, minimum 12 hours a day behind the counters for the business to take off. And then he said, what about medicine? Have you lost your license or anything? I said, not at all. I just wanted this on the side. She said, well, let's talk about medicine. And then he actually developed the whole idea that with my skills, I could open on my own.
Were you scared to open on your own?
Very scared.
Why do you think private practice scared you? Because I know that scares a lot of dentists.
Well, listen, I had commitments. I had 4,000 or 5,000 expenses coming out of well, actually it wasn't 4 and 5,000. It was about 3,000 a month between mortgage, schooling, whatever expenses I had. And I said, where am I going to get this regular salary? Regular salary really ties you up and you lose a lot of opportunity, I have to say. So, and obviously also a little bit of the NHS pension. It's fine. But then eventually I took up his idea. He designed the logo for me. He actually gave me a strategy as well. I said, I'm going to give it 6 months. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to go back to the Middle East.
Doctor,
within 3 months, I was earning more than what I was earning.
Wow.
In private practice?
In private practice.
Wow.
3 months.
But how were you spreading the word at that time? Were you doing Google then or not yet?
There was no Google then. There was only the Yellow Pages, and you have to wait your 10 because it's only published once a year. And if you just missed it, bad luck. We used the usual business strategies, flyers into people's home, for example.
And was it fertility?
No,
this was gynae.
No.
This was gynae.
It was a one-stop gynecological center. It still is. Because of the skills I had, you can have the ultrasound at the same time. You can have blood tests almost at the same time. We are a unique clinic, really, to be honest. You don't have to come back for follow-ups. We give the results by email. I don't bring people back. We do the ultrasound at the same time. If you need a colposcopy, you have it at the same time. So we were attractive. And obviously the price was less than most private hospitals.
Yeah.
And also the services were better than a lot of... You have to have a best selling point. You can't really have a business successful without a better selling point. That's what makes business more advanced. And then I went to partnership because the only thing was missing is an IVF clinic. So I went to partnership with my colleague, Dr. Gorgi. We opened in 2004, but we've been talking since 2002. So I was only about 50, 52, 53.
But see how late Dad started his private practice.
So it's never too late.
It's never too late.
And I'm 77, and I
works.
don't intend to stop really completely, but obviously reduced my sessions a little bit. Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about, obviously, fertility. So now you said the average age of women having children in your clinic is 33 to 35 years old.
In this country.
Now, talk to me, first of all, from a biological perspective, totally factually, scientifically, what happens to women's fertility when they hit 30 and above?
So women, when they reach adulthood, say 13, 14, they have about 250,000 follicle, and follicle contains immature eggs inside. And only one of them come out each month. So, you do the math yourself. So by the time you reach 20, you had some reductions. And the rate of reduction is very slow until about 30. And then the curve starts to become steeper. So you lose more eggs as the ovaries get older. I'm not talking about women getting older now, because women are much younger now at an older age. So you might feel young because you're going to the gym and you're keeping the heart and you're keeping everything going. But the ovary hasn't evolved really to accustom to that. So at 30, you lose more eggs between 30 and 35 than 20 to 30. And after 35, the curve even becomes more steeper.
Stress.
So between 35 and 40, sorry. And I told you that before 30, but it doesn't mean you can't get pregnant, but you just lose, more eggs. They just die. They just become atrophied. But you still have eggs.
Can anyone do anything to improve their egg quality and quantity later on in life? Can you do anything? Or is it just the usual stuff like good diet, No?
Nothing, even diet, I cannot tell you. The ovary has its...
So there's no studies to show?
Its own cycles. No.
What about stress though? Because there's been a massive... There has been studies to show that stress in general, let's talk about whatever age...
It makes you age.
No, but also stress has an implication on people's ability to get pregnant. Some people say, the moment I stopped stressing about it, I fell pregnant. Do you see what I mean?
But you're talking about ovulation, not ovarian aging.
Okay.
Yes, stress can affect a monthly ovulation. You can have irregular periods due to stress because you're not ovulating on a regular basis. So let's be clear. In order to have a regular period, you have to have an egg coming out, in the middle of the month. So ovulation can be affected by stress, but not ovarian aging. So when you reach, there's another complicating factor. So by the time you reach 35, the egg quality, and what I mean by egg quality, in order for the eggs to fertilize and make a human beings, you have 23 pairs of chromosomes. So these 23 pairs have to split to become 23 single. So when they unite with the man's sperms, also 23 singles, you make 23 pairs, a human being which is a mix of dad and mom. However, when the ovary ages from 35 onwards, that splitting of the chromosomes is not perfect. So some chromosomes, especially 21, chromosome 18, chromosome 13, they continue to stick together. And you end up having one egg with 24 chromosomes and one egg with 22. Either of them, when they unite with the partners, or husband, you end up with a 145 chromosome and 147 chromosome. Both of them are abnormalities, are abnormal children.
Interesting. Do you have statistics on how many people nowadays are undergoing fertility treatment within the UK? Do you know any stats? Like, as in, how many people are having either IVF or egg freezing or anything like that?
Not in my head, yes.
Yeah.
So sorry, I don't know enough. Egg freezing is where you're fertile, you're going to save some eggs because you want to have kids later.
So let me tell you.
IVF is you're not fertile, but you're trying to...
No, so Dad can go into this further, but basically when I was 32, he said to me, if you've not had kids yet, you better think about freezing your eggs. So he had a frank conversation. He said, because the quality and quantity of your eggs is better early on than later on. Because a lot of women, they try to freeze their eggs, as far as I know, 38, 39, and they can get like 4 eggs, right? Isn't it? They don't get many at all, depending on each case. But the earlier you do it, from what I understand, the better the outcome could be. So when I froze my eggs, I found it a very stressful experience. Like, to be honest, Dr. Gorgi, who is my dad's business partner, he's brilliant. He gets really high success rates. That's why I've referred a lot of people. But it's a really emotional experience. The hormones. I mean, ask my dad. I was in tears, the hormones.
Daily injections.
And that was okay. But for me, it was like they removed the eggs under sedation. They got 19 healthy eggs in one go. I thought it was pretty good, no?
Very good.
Yeah. And they're there now in the bank. They are there. But you know what's also hilarious, which you again can explain? You get charged for storage as a woman. No, but apparently sperm doesn't get charged for storage. Is that true?
No, if you want to, listen, storage needs a building, needs a freezer, and needs people to monitor it. You have to pay.
Yeah. So sperm, you have to pay for storage.
Everything you have to pay for storage.
Okay, fine. I'm spreading fake news.
Why store it then if you don't have a building? Where would you store it?
And then IVF is when people have a problem conceiving a child. But I think there's loads of different problems that can happen. And again, Dad can shed a light on it. There's people that can get, like, an embryo can be formed, but it doesn't stick. So they get miscarriages. Yeah. And there's people that actually can't get pregnant. So what's your thoughts on that? Like, why are these numbers increasing?
So I really want to make a very important point, okay? So we already explained that the number of follicles which contains immature eggs decreases every year. Every year. So slowly until the age of 30, a little bit steeper, 30 to 35, more steep from 35 to 40, and from 40 onwards, even worse. So by the time you reach the menopause, there are hardly any eggs. So we call that egg attrition. So everybody assumes I will be okay at 30, 31, 32. I'm still okay. Okay until 35. It's not true. But I don't want to scare you. I have seen ovaries which hardly contains any eggs or contain eggs equivalent to the age of 38. And I've seen it at 25 years of age.
Wow.
And as a result of seeing it, and that's not only just by ultrasound, also there's a blood test to monitor it called anti-Mullerian hormone.
It's AMH?
AMH.
Mine was quite low. That's what Gorgi told me.
Well, yours was borderline. 12 was okay still, but under 10 and under 6 is worse. So my recommendation is that before you reach such a decision to delay your pregnancy, have an ultrasound at the
Just check.
at the age of 25 to check your ovarian reserve. And if it's a lot and it's fine and it's absolutely normal, I think you can leave it then safely at perhaps until 28, 30 before you have another. But I would strongly recommend from 30 to 40, every year you monitor your ovarian reserve, just like an ovarian health, by ultrasound, where we observe and count the number of eggs, as well as anti-Mullerian hormones. And as long as they are healthy, then you're okay to wait. But once they start going down, then you can seriously think, am I going to have a baby? Am I in a position to have a baby? Or shall I freeze my eggs? Now, the advantage of freezing your eggs early at a younger age is because the quality is much better. So having 19 eggs at the age of 35 is not the same as having 19 eggs at the age of 25, for example, because some of the eggs are bound to be unhealthy, poor quality, and they may not fertilize. But that's fine. But 19 is better. Not only that, if you leave it until 35, the number of follicles will be less. The number of eggs retrieved really for freezing will be less. The quality will be less. So you can see my point. So that's my advice. As far as ovarian reserve, just to summarize, an ultrasound scan at 25, just to know that you are following the normal curve, and then 30, and from 30 onwards, once a year, unless you decide to have a baby already.
Do you know what is interesting, actually? So there was a dentist, lovely one, you know, as well, and his wife was so grateful to me when I spoke openly about my egg freezing. People weren't talking about it that much online. I went out and was like, guys, I've just done this, and everyone was like, whoa. And the reason was because they tried to have a baby when she was 32, they couldn't, and when they went to the doctor, she had early onset menopause. Yeah, and then they got 2 eggs from her. And luckily one implanted, and they have very lucky one child, and she only has one child at 32.
I'm very interested to learn. Okay, we had the scientific side there, but from a woman, the social side of the question of
the ball is in your court now.
Well, the question of how would it feel if someone told you can't have children? Number one, number two. The process, going through the process, and you said you had stress or hormonal issues, and then from yourself, you must have had to break it to people that you can't have children a million times.
I never say that.
Well, okay,
it's a wrong statement.
Sure.
Because I was going to ask that. Why is it a wrong statement?
Wrong statement because we know of sporadic, rare pregnancies which happen even 2 years after the menopause.
Really?
And the Family Planning Association.
What's the oldest?
Gordon Ramsay's. What did you say about Gordon Ramsay's wife?
Huh?
Gordon Ramsay's wife got naturally pregnant at 47.
What's the oldest pregnancy you know of?
As I've seen at 47 and 48.
48.
And spontaneous.
But can I ask you something though? Do women, it must be a very difficult conversation, do they get offended in the clinic if you advise them to think about having a kid soon? Do they get offended?
I had a complaint.
See?
Well, I had a complaint when I mentioned to somebody, I noticed the low ovarian reserve, and I said, everything looks normal, but the number of eggs is small. I mean, I'm obliged to tell her. It's a finding which I have to write. And you know, if you are really in a position to have pregnancy, I think you should perhaps get on with it or monitor to the future. But people really hear half of the words.
They're triggered.
Yeah.
But we
talked... Big complaint, and by a famous journalist as well. Her mother-in-law was a famous journalist. I'll tell you off the record after that who was she. But it was terrible for me because here I tried to convey the facts, but people get upset from the facts. And not only that, they complain. They make a complaint. So I had to spend time to reply and explain.
Yeah. I think it's like a really difficult one because I think, like you said, more and more women, they want to delay having a child because they are more career focused. Also, I think that women have hired their standards from what they expect from a man as well, because they bring a lot more to the table now. They're like, I want to date someone that's X, Y, and Z. And then that all like delays the process. Now, I think ideally, if I'm completely honest with you, I would have had a child by now already. I put like an onus onto my career, but also always been like a serial monogamist. Do you see what I mean? And for whatever reason in the past, the relationship hasn't worked out in that way. And I was a very late bloomer, like my dad will tell you, like as in like I was very focused on like my studies, always had friends and stuff.
Let's say you couldn't have children.
Yeah.
What would that mean?
I think there's loads of options now, and I've already like discussed this with my partner. Like if I couldn't have children now naturally, I'd number one try to use my eggs. If I couldn't use my eggs, then I'd go through IVF. If I couldn't go through IVF, I'd consider a surrogate. I would even say that. Do you see what I mean? You know, so
yes, but you know, but some women, and to be honestly, I think you may be one of them. You're not really hot about having a child.
He just says this because I've delayed it.
You're a career, but you're a career woman. You have already married your career and you're enjoying it. You're having a happy life. Is it important nowadays to have a child?
Yes, but I think more so.
To you?
Yeah, because
It's
I think,
individual.
He makes a very good point.
Yeah,
It's an individual. It's not
all
that.
you had
Nowadays, it's
was
different.
motherhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I went
And
to
then someone said you can't have a child.
Yeah.
That would your purpose in life would
yeah,
be.
that's true. I mean, I had a friend.
It's no longer the purpose of life, you know?
Yeah, but but listen, now that I'm turning 37, I think I'm really stressed about the fact that I haven't had a child, because I think that I would feel very upset. This is like a personal thing. I think I'd feel, don't worry, Dad, you'll be a granddad.
No.
Like, I think that I would feel, but I think it's, but you know, like two of the girls that messaged me saying, oh, I've booked with Dr. Gorgi. One of them is a doctor. She's a doctor herself. And she was like messaging me. She was like, oh, I've got such bad depression at the moment because I can't find a partner and I'm doing all these like night shifts. It's really tough. It is tough.
No, it needn't be like that. To be honest, there is a life without children as well.
See, my dad always said to me when I used to, because what happened to me was I went to university. I met someone when I was 22 years old. We were together till I was 27. I thought I was going to get married to him. My parents thought I was going to get married to him. And in my mind, because of the narrative, which we've talked about, I was like, oh, it's cool. Like, I'm not 30 yet, so I'm not off the shelf. We broke up. Then I went into like, right, I have to try and find someone before I'm 30. Then I went for like some of the wrong people, these alpha male narcissists. And then my dad turned around to me and he said, do you know what? He goes, better to be alone than with the wrong person.
Yeah.
Yeah, this fear 100%. Of being left on the shelf. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's a funny one because I come across some they're like just out of dental school, now out looking for their husband type people. I mean, is it how real is that fear of being left on the shelf?
I think it's so real, but even like some of my closest friends, they got into depression because they weren't like getting married or proposed to by 30 and they got into depression. But I just think like 30, as I told you. However, when I said this online as well, men, the Andrew Tate lovers, were like, oh, of course, no man wants a woman who's 30. Her run-through rate is like massive, which is like hilarious because as we've just said, the Gen Z girls arguably are way more like sexually empowered. Do you know what I mean?
It's just someone trying to get a rise out of it.
Yeah, but I think it's very real. But I think it's interesting. Dad, do a lot of people, also women in your office, express anxiety about not finding the right partner?
Yes.
And having kids. They do.
Not a lot, but not as much as it used to be. But, 10 years ago was more common. I don't see it often now.
Why do you think?
So wait, someone doesn't have a partner, freezes their eggs.
No, not necessarily. He'll see someone for a gynecological check.
Generally, yeah.
And then they'll express, he's saying 10 years ago, I'm really sad I don't have anyone. Why do you think that's reduced now?
Because a lot of more women are career-oriented.
So now they don't care.
So they tell me at 32, they come, I just can't have a child now. I'm just about to start to get a good job and, be promoted.
Build a company.
Rhona, if you'd had a child at 30,
and I've seen
none of the last 7 years would have happened.
Do you think? I always think that I could balance it. I don't know. Maybe I'm being naive.
Maybe you can. Yeah,
but look at some.
You wouldn't be this person.
Look at some amazing people like within like the dental and medical community. Look at Yusra, for example. Like she's got like 3 kids. Do you see what I mean? And her own clinic and her own. Do you see what I mean? There are women out there that do it.
It's possible. I'm just saying you would not be the same person at all. Yeah. And okay, maybe a bit controversial. I don't think you'd be as successful as you've been.
Really?
When you've got a child to look after.
The problem in this country is childcare.
Yeah.
But if you are, and that's one of the reasons we chose to have children in the Middle East, because you can easily have childcare,
drivers, nannies, gardeners, cooks
for a small fee.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, right, like it was interesting because I've had a couple of patients in recently about 32, 33, and I say to them, any medical changes? A lot now, I would say 2 out of 5 of my clients are doing IVF. at the moment when I checked their medical history. And they said, it's really weird. The doctor actually can't find anything wrong. I menstruate. My husband, we try having sex during ovulation. We've been trying for 2 years. I can't get pregnant. And she goes, I'm doing my second sound of IVF. So what I'm trying to say to you is something must be going on beyond biological circumstances.
But we don't understand it yet. We call it idiopathic. Mm-hmm. There are obviously reasons which
but that's why I think
they're
lifestyle
undergoing
and stress.
research and immunology. Dr. Gorg is very hot on finding immune reasons, and there are some mixed feelings in the society about immune problems being a reason for infertility. Mm. He's one of the very few in this country and in London who looks into these reasons, and he brings success when somebody had 10 failed IVF. Mm-hmm. So there are some immune reasons, but yet it has to be proven as well in bigger studies and all that. There are some studies which shows it improves fertility rate. There are some studies which says no, it doesn't.
I'm not sure there's more stress now than there was before.
No, it's not stress.
Yeah.
Stress,
pollution, maybe processed foods or whatever that is, sleep or whatever. Would you adopt?
So I think
excellent consideration to adopt.
So it was interesting because I was I have to bring Bianca on the podcast. Bianca's my best friend. She told my dad that he was classist when we were 12 years old because she wanted to go, when we were 13, she wanted to go to a rave in King's Cross when King's Cross was when I was 13. So do you remember what King's Cross was like? We went to a place called Bagley's and my dad dressed like little Bagley's, like dressed in these little mini skirts and cross. My dad was like, you are not getting out of this car. So she's like, Dr. Eskander, stop being classist, Imagine, just because it was King's Cross.
King's Cross was an empty, bare land.
Yeah.
It was a dodgy area back
with
then.
Drugs and we were
dressed
sex
like
workers.
Yeah. So anyway, Bianca is so opinionated, and she has made the conscious decision. She had said, I do not want to have children. She made that from a young age. Haven't I told you this about her? Like, she doesn't want to. She wouldn't mind me saying this. She's an incredible psychotherapist. She was a journalist working in the Middle East, has worked for loads of different places. He loves her lots. Like, she's like a second daughter. But interestingly, her sister had IVF with a donor at 44. So she went to Greece. She got a donor, chose a very handsome Dutch man, whatever, got implanted, had the baby, completely healthy, fine. Second time round, she's 46. The IVF didn't work. So now she's going to be adopting a child. Now, I was having this conversation with Bianca and she turned around to me and she said, I think it was her partner that said, which I thought was a really interesting point. He goes, human beings have such an obsession with passing on their DNA and leaving a genetic imprint. Of course. And he goes, but it's a weird obsession. And he gave an example of his friends that tried to have a child for maybe 10 years, couldn't. They got a surrogate. The surrogate had twins. One of the babies had meningitis early and now is in a wheelchair. And he said that their whole life has been dedicated to the child in the wheelchair. And he said, but their obsession with trying to fight the biology also was hampered them in the end. Does that make sense? Yeah. But you could argue, obviously, that it's been very fulfilling, their life as a result. You could argue it both ways. But the point is...
It's a very important point.
Yeah, it's a very important point. But I don't think I necessarily want a child for my genetic DNA. I don't even think about that. I don't want to lose the surname Eskander, I told you, because then after you, it's gone. So I want to be Dr. Eskander. But in terms of for me having a child, there's more about that bond and having a human being that's your... someone you bring up and someone that you look after and nourish. And I think that, you could adopt. If I adopted though, I think I'd want someone that's a child that's maybe really opposite to me, as in a completely different culture and ethnicity. I don't know why. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know why. It's just something that I always thought sometimes I meet children that have been adopted and I don't know, I just feel
well, in so much as you don't want it to be a secret to talk, you want it to be out in the open.
Out in the open, exactly. And people just know. But not to get not for people to give me praise or anything, but I'd want it to be...
You don't want it to be a thing to hide.
Correct.
How interesting.
How would you feel about adoption, grandchildren, if that happened?
How do you know that your DNAs are half from me and half... How do you know? From me and your mom.
What do you mean? You've been cheating on mum?
How does anybody know what's inside you? A child whom you actually bring up from a young age is your child.
Yeah.
Does anybody take a test from him and say, "Oh, I want to see who you are." I mean, really, you don't see
Well,
the
I know.
DNA.
Well, I know several men who say they wouldn't adopt.
Yeah, but I think, but think about it, really.
Yeah. No, I agree
If
with
you
you.
brought up a child so young and he's
I agree with you.
adopted your environment and everything, what does it matter about the DNA?
I agree with you. But
You know?
there's an element of
I know there is.
having kids is so hard anyway.
Yes.
Having your own child is
It's
such
nature.
a massive
It's
nightmare.
Yeah, look, I think this is such a huge topic because
Yeah.
also, for example, Daddy, we had someone who I'm seeing tomorrow. We had an incredible man called John Lancaster on the podcast. He was born with Treacher-Collins syndrome. Do you know about Treacher-Collins?
No.
So you're born with certain features. So you don't have cheekbones, you don't have ear bones, and you look very distinct. And his parents didn't know at the time because I don't think the technology was available. So when he was born, they gave him up for adoption 2 days later. And on the adoption paper, they wrote that the parents were horrified by the child's face. Imagine he saw that. He grew up to be one of the most beautiful, kind, incredible human beings in the world, like us Payman, incredibly successful. He did a documentary. He tried to find his parents when he reached 30 because he thought maybe they were young, they didn't understand. He tried to reconnect. They still didn't want to have anything to do with him. However, the love that he has and the bond that he has with his adopted mother is unbelievable.
Exactly.
And he considers it to be
Those
his
are
mother.
yeah.
And I think that...
Why does he have to worry about his...
Yeah, and I think he's okay with it now.
I know.
He is okay with it now. But I think, like, the point is that we all... It is that love and bond. But then on the other side of the spectrum, I have certain friends that have now, because we're older, they meet people and they get into relationships and the guy already has kids.
Yeah.
2 kids, 3 kids,
Yeah.
whatever. It's tough.
Would you do
It's
that?
tough. I'm not sure. It really depends. And I
Much
always say, like, the
complicated.
situation, it's complicated because certain friends of mine, like, I've gone from living my best single life. I love this human, but we have to now pick up the kids. We can't go on holiday. It's a lot to take on someone
Yeah,
else's
it is a
children.
lot.
Do you know
It
what I
is
mean?
a lot, yeah.
But then, is there a difference between taking on someone's child, as you said, where you're being a step parent,
Yeah.
rather than when you're adopting?
Different. That
Do you
is
see what I mean? It's
Yeah,
a
there is a
difference.
difference.
There's a difference.
There is a
Do you see what I
difference.
mean? Because you could argue that
a massive
being,
difference.
because you could argue being a step parent wasn't necessarily choice, whereas an adoption is complete choice. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, we're running out of time. and I
Just
thought-
before we leave that
Yeah.
point, some people can accept an abnormal child and some people cannot. It's fine. I think both of them are correct. And to give it to a foster parents who actually are happy to have a Down syndrome baby is better than growing with 2 parents who cannot physically look after a Down syndrome baby.
What do you think?
They are both just different kinds of people.
It's an important question because now you can screen for Down syndrome and you can you can abort the kid, right?
Yeah.
But then you also see some beautiful Down syndrome children turn out amazing.
Yes. But some people cannot accept it. Fine.
I've had this situation where someone come asking me for advice. What should I do?
Really?
Yeah.
And we have in Iran. I know of 2 Down syndrome kids like in our circle,
Community, yeah.
in my direct community, and you're right in that they're loving and so on. But the one thing that I was trying to impress on this person was that it's once you're gone, you have to worry about this kid. Yeah, to understand that you can give your whole life to this kid, but then once you're finished, once you're gone, there's that worry of who looks after the kid now, which a lot of people have with any child with a disability.
In Iran it's a problem, but here the institutions and the country looks after them very well.
Still.
And they are integrated into society now. But you're right, they are at a disadvantage, but it doesn't mean...
I mean, she decided to abort and understandably, difficult decision.
It's a difficult decision.
Such a difficult decision.
Yeah, it is a difficult decision.
I want to ask something else on the men because I feel like this is not talked about. A couple of my friends also had IVF and it was turned out it was actually the man's sperm. How common is it for it to also be the man's sperm? So she couldn't get pregnant because there was something wrong with the sperm.
The man was infertile, rather.
Yeah, so he's not infertile, but there was something wrong with the motility or something like that.
I mean, it's the manufacture, the factory in the testes, which doesn't function very well, doesn't bring them
But are we
very well.
seeing that it is also something that is being talked about? So men can also experience problems.
Of course, yes. 15% of infertility problems are because of the men.
Oh,
We know
really?
that.
15%.
So it's 1 in 6. It's fine.
Yeah.
And men in this country accepts it very well.
Do they? So do you feel... So, I mean, as a man, and both of you can tell me, if you were told or that you had problems, your sperm as
It
well...
wouldn't have bothered me. And I would have been quite happy to have a sperm donor.
So is that the only option if you have sperm problems, or can you then, or do then they do IVF?
It depends on the problem. So
Yeah.
some of them have problem in the whole formation. There is not one normal sperm. The percentage of abnormal sperms in an ejaculate, just guess. Tell me what is.
Don't know.
How many normal sperms in a normal ejaculate?
know.
Percentage.
Abnormal.
Normal or abnormal? Normal.
Yeah.
Let's say normal. How many do you expect?
80%.
And you just give a guess.
I'm just going to go with you, 70.
Only 4% are normal.
Oh, in a normal ejaculate.
In a normal ejaculate.
Is that right?
That's the count. 4 to 5%.
Wow.
95% lack a head, lack a tail.
No.
Absolutely, they can't swim. Absolutely. That's why they come out in millions. And those ones don't reach the egg because they can't swim.
How interesting.
So, but 4% they manage. They are, the winner. You start the race for the best sperm from that time of ejaculation. The best one will reach the egg.
How would you feel if you were told that something was wrong with your sperm and that was affecting your ability to have a child?
Yeah.
How would you have reacted?
I think at the time I'd be okay with it.
Really?
Now, having had kids and so on, now in retrospect, it would be something
Difficult.
more difficult. But I think at the time I would have either thought of something a donor or I'm actually up for people who say I don't want children.
There's well, Bianca's one of them, I told you.
But listen, I would have been very upset if I didn't have you.
Yeah.
Imagine.
But listen,
Imagine, huh?
but I think like my dad's incredible because he's always been very open. My dad also had prostate cancer when he was how old were you, Daddy, when that happened? Worst time of my life. It's like I blocked it.
It's in early 60s actually.
But it's actually
64, 65.
it was the prostate cancer.
Early. It was early. It was pre-cancer.
Yeah,
really.
Daddy it was stage 2. I remember. It's just how they get over it. My mum was the same. But he said a lot of men are in denial about prostate cancer. It's actually as common, I read somewhere, as diabetes for men. It's a very, very common cancer.
Yeah.
And a lot of men are in denial because the prostate is so linked to, like manlyhood or whatever.
Virility.
Yeah.
A lot of men don't visit the doctor.
Yeah, they don't, and they ignore it.
Terrible about their health. We don't check as women.
And
that's why I decided to become a gynecologist. To look after.
And my dad actually was very open, as in it didn't ruin his life. He was like, this is what's happened to me. He had the surgery, and you got on with it. You got on with it because you just felt. And a lot of men won't have the surgery, by the way, for their prostate, because obviously when this was going on, a lot of men refused to have it.
Because yes, I know, because of the complications. Yeah.
And
Doctor, do if you're looking at the psychology of fertility.
Cytology.
Psychology. We have in cosmetic dentistry, we've got there's a type of patient that's like a body dysmorphic syndrome that is looking for the cosmetic dentistry, but
a lot of women will consider it failure.
Yeah.
That they can't have a child.
Yeah.
Really.
So you have to be so empathetic rather, and supportive, really. Yeah. And also never lose hope. Never use the word that you... And truly, you can't lose hope. Some people even go and have IVF 1, 2, 3 cycles. It doesn't succeed. A year later, they become pregnant.
I've had that happen to friends, yeah.
Yeah. So really, never give up hope at any time.
But what about the body dysmorphic syndrome person will be blaming in this case, their teeth for their happiness.
Yeah.
And whatever you do to their teeth, they're not going to be happy.
Yeah.
Is there an equivalent in fertility? Is it like someone who's given the name to their pain, the fact they can't have children, and is going after it in a sort of crazy way?
They get disappointed, that's all. And then nowadays they think of options of egg donation. So egg donation is available now, and a lot of people accept it, just like sperm donation as well. In this country, obviously different cultures. If you go, for example, to my Egyptian world or to the Gulf world, they'll be very upset. The man will be insulted in his masculinity and the woman in her femininity, because that's their role. But as they become educated now, and I think they become less. One
of my beauticians, who's Iranian, who I'd been seeing for 12 years, she sadly could never get pregnant, and her husband became very abusive. And then he ended up divorcing her because she never had children. But then later on, when tests were done, it turned out that she doesn't have a womb.
Yeah.
Doesn't have a womb.
doesn't have a womb. But in Iranian culture, she was totally shamed for not being able to have children. She was born. She was one of those where she was actually born without a womb.
It's not fair.
She never had a period ever in her life.
Yeah.
Right, we could go on for hours. We need to have you back on. I want to end the podcast, Dad, because you always like my words of wisdom. What's one piece of advice that you would give to someone, or what's the one piece of advice you could give your younger self, knowing what you know now?
My younger self, myself.
So imagine you see now Dr. Alex Eskander when he's 20 years old. What would you tell him, knowing what you know now about life?
Yes. I think, and I've told you that several times, stay focused. As an early age, there's nothing called, I'm just going to study this and then I'm going to find out what I'm going to do. Focus, decide what you want to do in life, and work hard to achieve your goal. And you must have a goal. Yeah. If you don't have a goal, then really you could waste a lot of years. So you must have a goal. You may be disappointed you don't reach your goal, but that will take you to other goals you could reach as well on the side. But you must have a goal and ambition in life. No ambitions means you just become static and you leave it up to the world and to the circumstances of the world. That's my number one advice, a goal. Number two, you have to be flexible in life at any stage. Had I not been flexible, I would never have been successful. Mm-hmm. So my practice moved from one section of the things I know to another section, to a third section. I have modified it many times.
Pivoted.
And same in life in general. You just have to adapt. So if you can't afford a certain type of luxury, you just have to downsize and then move upwards. When I'm sure you agree with that.
Sure.
If you're not flexible, you suffer as well. And I know people who had to they lost their house and they lived in government. I don't want to say the council, but they lived in government houses and then they made it again and they bought another property. That is life, as long as you keep going and look after your health, I think. And I love the young generation. Nowadays, they are so healthy all over the world. They go to the gym. My generation, it was smoke and drinks and style because we were marketed heavily by Hollywood. So I could never understand. They had a glass of whiskey all the time. That's why I drank whiskey, to keep in style. Similarly with Marlboro and Kent's and a see-through shirt. Do you remember? Nowadays, it's actually a stigma, and bravo for the government and the culture that it has changed our perception of all these bad things. They're amazing, the new generation.
On that subject, I know loads of 18 to 25-year-olds who don't drink.
Yeah, it's a massive thing now. I love them.
And we went with one of them. This guy was older, but he asked at the pub. It was a pub, normal pub. Said, "What alcohol-free lagers do you have?" And they had 6. Not just one. Six different types of alcohol-free beer.
It's amazing. Yeah, amazing. And
it's become a thing.
So health is very important.
Yeah, but my dad can vouch for me. I've not been drinking ever.
But only because you're lucky. You never liked it, really. I mean, I tried to introduce you in order to become normal in a society. But, you are normal without drinks as well,
Okay, thank you so much, Daddy.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a real honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.